What's good, folkers? Snap Turtle in the truck. I wanted to give you guys a little taste of my book. I was going to read an excerpt from chapter 2. Well, not chapter 2. I think it's chapter 2. Chapter 3, maybe. Chapter 2 of The Seeds of Dark Matter, now available on Amazon. I'll put a description. I'll put a link in the description to go buy the book. If you guys want to support, that'd be greatly appreciated. All right. So now, the part of the book I'm going to read takes place when Wakan, the protagonist of the book, the main character, is leaving a storage facility where he has some things stored at. All right. So now he's getting ready to leave, and he encounters some people. Now, you guys have to bear with me. I'm not that great at reading out loud because my mind moves faster than my mouth can speak, if that makes sense. So if y'all can just bear with me a little bit. I practiced a couple times. Hopefully it comes out pretty good. All right, so anyway, here we go. I sighed and glared at the strange man who now stood only a few yards from the front of my truck. He was of medium height, slight build, with a shaved head, his brown eyes nearly black. He wore a skin-tight black tank top and black cargo shorts over dark tennis shoes. Baldy's dry lips were curled up to one side in a menacing smirk, though he shifted nervously on his feet. He held his black semi-automatic pistol in one hand, which let me know this guy was an amateur. I continued to stare into his crazed, desperate eyes as I grabbed the 9mm 6 Sauer P226 Legion from my pistol bag. At the same time, I took a deep breath to cover the movement, which neither he or his two friends seemed to notice. The bald guy motioned with his pistol for me to get out. I nodded and feigned a nervous shudder. I turned off the truck, removed the keys from the ignition, and slowly opened the door. I eased one foot down onto the pavement, then the other, and climbed the rest of the way out of the truck. I stood behind the open driver's door, attempting to make as small a target as possible. "Hey, motherfucker," Baldy said in a southern drawl that dripped from his yuck mouth like blackstrap molasses. "Get from behind the door." I ignored him and instead glanced over at his two cohorts. One guy stood to Baldy's left, but a few feet behind him, near the street. He appeared to be the lookout. He stood tall, carried a few layers of fat, and wore short cropped hair. His moist ebony skin stood out against his drenched white t-shirt, which he wore over a pair of blue jeans. He did not have an eye on me as he watched the street beyond, perhaps for cops, but more likely for brain-dead freaks. I saw no gun, but was sure he had one tucked away somewhere, maybe in one of his many folds. Next, I assessed the kid on my far right, who casually held a gun at his side as he leaned against the wall of a storage facility office, just inside the gate. He had a muscular build, stood at average height, and wore locks that ran down to his mid-back. He clenched his square jaw, regarding me with an air of confidence that usually accompanies getting one's way through intimidation. I figured that he led this merry band. "Hey," Baldy exclaimed, and I slowly averted my eyes back to him. "I said step away from the door." "Why?" I asked, my tone cool and even. "You can't hit shit with that thing unless your target is right in front of you?" Baldy wiped sweat from his brow and licked his lips before he said, "Nah, Nick, just don't want to get your blood all over my new whip." I didn't reply. "You got 5 seconds," he said. "You three can walk away now," I said, alive. "Or you can die first. Then your fearless leader over there. And lastly, the big bone dipshit watching the street. He's not that so big a threat. He won't be able to draw his gun fast enough to help you or himself." The leader laughed, and the fat kid snapped his head in my direction, his eyes wide with an incredulous look on his 3-chin face. How could he be so fat in this fucking heat? Baldy stopped fidgeting and peered down at the door, which blocked any view of my hands. "Fool, is you crazy?" Baldy said, his voice pitched high. "You got 5 seconds, I said, smiling. I had begun to run the calculations before I stepped out of the truck, and I continued as the gang's wheels ran in confusion. My guess was that the three had killed before, or that at least the leader had, but they were still amateurs. They obviously had no sense of trigonometry. Baldy was 5 yards in front of me and had a somewhat clear line of sight on his target, namely me. 45 degrees and a few feet to Baldy's left stood Fatty, who had a clear line of sight through the front windshield, which I had kept exceptionally clean. However, he did not have his gun drawn, if he in fact had one. No doubt, he didn't want to attract negative attention to his activities. The leader was just 10 degrees to Fatty's left, but a few feet closer to me. While his gun was drawn, he had a terrible vector because the body of the Tundra blocked much of his view of me, and that made me a small target. They counted me as a normal citizen who would give in easily, and so their vigilance for a preemptive strike was non-existent. Had it been me, I would post Baldy to my immediate left at 0 degrees from the target, while I stood 45 degrees from him. Fatty would remain as rear security, and because the passenger side door of the Tundra was closed, we would have a target covered in a 180-degree vector. If the target decided to dive back into the truck, Baldy would take it out with no problems. If he opted to dart toward the rear of the truck, I could take him out much easier than Baldy, because it's generally more effective to hit a target moving toward you than if it moves laterally or obliquely from you. If the target ran toward Baldy's left or right, we both would have a decent shot. As it stood at this very moment, they were lax, and I needed them to be much laxer. Hold on, gotta sip some water. I don't know how voice actors do this, man. It's a talent. Anyway, I continue. As it stood at this very moment, they were lax, and I needed to make them laxer. Okay, I said, you can have the truck. I was just trying to act tough. Tough will get your ass killed, the leader said, as he continued to lean against the wall of the building. I nodded and stepped slightly from behind the truck door, just enough for Baldy not to see my cig. I held the keys out in front of me and said to Baldy, here you go. Please don't shoot me. I'm not sure if I appeared convincingly shaken, because I can be taciturn at times. Baldy smiled smugly and lowered his gun slightly. At the same time, the leader pushed off the wall and began to stroll carefree toward the truck as Fatty pumped a fist in the air. He moved towards me as well, still with no gun to speak of in his hands. Baldy held out a free hand to accept my gift as he started toward me, but before he could take a third step, I thrust the keys hard and fast at his face. At the same time, I stepped from behind the driver's door of the truck, brought my cig up, and leveled it on the guy's face. I pulled the trigger, and suddenly Baldy sprouted a third eye in the center of his shiny forehead. The truck keys sailed past him as he began to drop. I pivoted my right leg to the back, shifted my aim quickly to the leader, and squeezed off another round before Baldy even hit the ground dead. The finely tooled cig bucked in my hand, but the recoil did not affect me. I hit the leader where I wanted to, in his gun shoulder, between his right deltoid and pectoral muscles. The leader screamed, dropped his pistol, and grabbed at his shoulder with his left hand. His face contorted from a look of smug aplomb to surprise, and finally to a grimace of agony and shock. Fatty did pretty much what I expected of him, which was to fumble frantically at his waistband, stumble back with sheer terror plastered on his face. He fell on his well-cushioned ass, and a muzzle flash followed by the bang of a gun report above his right leg. And a muzzle flashed followed by the bang of a gun report above his right leg. I heard the distinct clinking of my 9mm cartridges, spent 9mm cartridges, hitting the ground as the scent of cordite filled the air. That should be a period. Fatty screamed in pain as a red blossom spread around the crotch of his jeans. He had shot himself, obviously. Moist, warm wind kicked up from the east, a harbinger of the storm. It felt like the battle that sparked the war. I slowly and deliberately walked over to Baldy. He lay flat on his back. A pool of blood had formed around his cranium, with archipelagos of brain matter and skull fragments scattered about it. More blood and brain matter had spread a few yards behind him. The hollow point slug can cause great devastation to one's skull, thick or not. His dark brown eyes were wide open, staring blankly at me. Nothing resided in those glassy orbs any longer. Sloppy, I muttered. I looked up in time to see Fatty raise a large caliber revolver and attempt to level it on me. It had to be a double action, which would explain the accidental discharge upon the clumsy production of it. Fatty's gun hand wavered, and I watched the tendons in his wrist. I leaned my upper torso quickly to the right just before he pulled the trigger, and the thunder of the revolver shook the world around me. I had already raised my own gun and pulled the trigger upon moving out of the path of his round. It elicited a lesser boom on the tail end of the revolver's report. I felt the discharged air of the revolver's fat slug as it whizzed past my left ear and heard the whine and crack as it broke the sound barrier. Jesus, I suck at reading out loud. He was a decent shot, given his deteriorating condition. If I hadn't dodged, I'd likely been killed. My round struck Fatty's neck, right above his décolleté, and tore out a few cervical discs on his way out. His hands jerked up toward the hole my round produced, but because I essentially broke his neck, the effort was cut short by a nearly instant death. He slumped forward, and blood poured from both the entry and exit wound, but he was still could be. A large puddle of blood formed around him, larger than the one around Baldy, which indicated that Fatty had struck his own femoral artery. I shook my head in disappointment. "You motherfucker," the leader cried, whom I kept in the periphery of my awareness during the entire ordeal. He had slumped to the ground. His back rested against the wall. A streak of blood ran down the wall behind him from where the slug had exited his shoulder. Mother, he sputtered, but didn't bother to reach for the gun with his good left hand. It lay near his incapacitated right hand. Blood drenched the sleeve of his white t-shirt. The seething hatred in his eyes made me laugh. The nerve of this guy. Here he tried to carjack and possibly kill me, and he was mad because I defended myself? I walked over to him, knelt and regarded his shoulder. Your scapula. Oh, sorry. I walked over to him, knelt and regarded his shoulder. Your scapula is probably shattered, I said to him, especially if you can't move your right arm. Incredulously, he said, "Fuck you, nigga." I nodded in understanding and looked out into the empty street to my left and the lot of the storage facility to my right. The Ford Expedition that belonged to the family I saw on the way out sat idling a few storage rows back from us. They were keeping their distance, which I deemed smart. I looked back at the leader and said, "You know where you fucked up, right?" "Huh?" he gasped. His breaths labored. "What you mean?" I wiped the sweat from my face with my gun hand and said, "The fatal flaw in your hijacking scheme. You know how you fucked that up?" "Why that shit even matter?" "Well, I'm a man who believes in learning from experience and teaching what I learned to ignorant motherfuckers like you through experience." "You're crazy." "No, I'm perfectly sane. What I am is a high-functioning sociopath, which is not the same as being insane." The man shook his head in disbelief. "When you ambush someone with the intent of robbing them of their possessions and you haven't been staking them out for at least 3 weeks, it's important that you do not underestimate your target." "Man, we just wanted to get the hell out of town." I couldn't get to my new whip, bruh. I suck, apparently, at Southern accents. Now I'm talking about. Anyway, the leader shifted a little. I get why you did it. But someone like me isn't just going to let you take their shit without a fight. Where you fucked up is the manner in which you assigned firing vectors, if you even did that at all. Hell, my 11-year-old daughter could have taken your asses out. I don't have time to break it all down to you, but I will give you some choices. The leader took a deep breath before asking, "You wanted them The leader took in a deep breath before asking, "You one of them black diamond cats or something?" I chuckled and replied, "Nah, man. I'm just a father trying to get to his family in Cali." He nodded and began to tremble. He was going into shock. Choices? Choices. No. Choices? Yes, choices. You know what's going on at the hospital up the road, right? Yeah. He closed his eyes and swallowed. Then you know about the zombies and how they're going to overrun Miami in a hot minute? He nodded, said, "So now what?" I rose to my full height and placed the barrel of my cig against his sweat-slicked forehead. I could put a bullet through your head, save you a bit of misery. Or I can let you live, and you can fight to survive with that bum arm of yours. I'll even leave your gun and your partner's gun. They aren't going to need them. Why would you do that? I shrugged and said, "You're no longer an immediate threat to me. And like I said, I like to teach. Each one teach one." He stared down at his limp right hand, but did not reply for a moment. He seemed to be weighing his options. He was young, probably not older than 25, but as the blood drained from his body, he appeared much older, haggard and tired. Through a grimace of pain and the gritting of teeth, the young man said, I want to live. I want to live. Okay, I said, and kicked his weapon a few inches away from his hand, just in case he got a wild hair up his ass and tried to shoot me in the back as I walked away. I may be empathetic, but I'm no idiot. I turned and walked over to the fat guy, grabbed him by both his ankles and pulled. His large torso hit the ground with a wet smack of blood, flesh, and asphalt as I dragged his heavy ass to where Baldy lay, out of the way of my truck. The leader of the unfortunates had passed out, but his chest rose and fell with the effort of breathing. He probably wouldn't survive another 20 minutes, but I couldn't concern myself with that. Time had begun to run out for every living human being on the planet at this point. I snatched the keys up from beside Baldy's cooling form and got back into the Tundra. I turned the engine over with a satisfying roar and drove toward the exit of the storage facility. Just as I reached the sidewalk, a woman let out a shrill scream. I snapped my head toward the sound and slammed the brakes just as a young black woman ran into my front right fender. She looked at me, eyes wide with terror, as she stood frozen in place. Are you fucking kidding me? I asked the Cosmos, who might very well be a man from Los Angeles. She turned and frantically held her arms up out in front of her, as if to ward off a threat. Annoyed, I leaned forward to see what terrified this woman. A few yards ahead of her were several shambling figures, with arms raised, reaching for her. Their glassy eyes shone with the hunger I hadn't seen since my adventures as a ranger. Fuck me, I muttered, as I threw the selector back in the park. I grabbed my cig and got out of the pickup once more and darted to the front of the truck. I wondered why this chick didn't just run to the empty street to get away. The answer came when I peered left and saw more people walking toward us, their gaits uncoordinated. 10 times worse. I ran to the frozen, still screaming woman and grabbed her by the shoulder. She jumped in surprise and whirled around to face me, but a closed right fist came along for the ride in a surprisingly sharp hook. I ducked under the swing, grabbed her by the back of the neck and right bicep, and swung her away from my truck fender. I raised my pistol and leveled it on the tall white man who wore a dusty-looking pinstripe suit. His ashen skin had a green undertone, like the ghouls I saw on the news, and I could see the infection spreading through his veins caused this. His mouth hung open in a hungry snarl. The smell surprised me the most. The acrid stench of rotting garbage, accompanied by the subtle sweetness, hung in the air like moist tendrils. It didn't hit me until he was almost upon me, so maybe they were newly infected. The most disturbing thing about this creature was his wide eyes, which were covered in an opaque film. I could see his blue irises and his blown-out pupils. The sclera of his vacant eyes were shot through with broken capillaries, but they were green instead of red, like the vessels under his skin. It didn't take much to convince me that this individual would not recover from what ailed him. I pulled the trigger and shifted my aim to the zombie woman behind him, who appeared to be in the same condition, and fired again just a split second after the first. Both were headshots, and both victims dropped dead where they stood, as though I had turned off a switch. Green-red blood, skull, and brain matter sprayed the other diseased people behind them. I turned toward the driver's side of the Tundra and took out two more damaged beings. The loud reports of the volley pierced the dense air about us. Suddenly, the rest of the smaller horde burst into relative action. Their moans became shrill, guttural screams, and their stuttered steps became more frenetic and insistent. There were 5 on the sidewalk and 3 more in the street, meandering toward me like drunken football players, only less coordinated. They occasionally bumped into each other, which would have been laughable, but I couldn't afford the luxury of chuckling. I wasted 2 more presumed dead as they came at me from the street and quickly got into the Tundra. I threw the shifter in the drive and pressed firmly on the accelerator, taking care not to needlessly spin out my tires. The grill guard hit 2 zombies, and they vanished as though sucked under a bed by their worst nightmares. The truck jumped up ever so slightly as the tires reduced the zombies' bodies to broken, jellied forms. I turned right into the westbound lanes of 36th Street after quickly checking for oncoming traffic. Horns honked and tires screeched from behind me, but I didn't concern myself with such trivialities. Careless, dead people crowding the street. Careless, dead people crowding the street. Oh, my bad. Careless, dead people crowded the street, and they gave even less of a shit. Ten times worse. Once I passed the worst of it and neared the freeway on-ramp, I glanced over at the woman sitting in the passenger seat and said, "What the fuck are you doing in my truck?" She sat there and frantically rocked back and forth, her breaths deep and labored. She bit down on her lower lip and regarded me with wild eyes. She muttered, "I didn't know what else to do." "You could have hidden in the storage facility somewhere," I snapped, focusing my attention on the street. Because of the trailer maneuvering around and shambling infected in the street was a laborious task, my bad. Some vehicles were lined up to enter the on-ramp of the Interstate 95 where I needed to go. If the expressway was gridlocked, once we got on, I would be screwed. "It seems safer in here," the girl petitioned, as though that were all she needed to say. "Well, I'll drop you off in the next town," I said, more to myself. Jesus. All right. She stared at me as though I slapped her full in the face. "But she stammered. "I don't know what to do." I detected a slight Caribbean accent that put a little edge to her voice. "You hide out until the government cleans up the mess." She blinked as though stupefied. "So I just wait and hope those things don't find me?" "I could give you some water and a box of MREs. The plumbing should be fine. Utilities should be up for a few more days." "What?" "You'll be okay." "Where are you going?" "Doesn't matter." So you're just going to leave me on the side of the road like a maimed horse? No, I'd shoot a maimed horse in the head, in the meadow or something. I saved your life. She scoffed. Only because I was in your way. She crossed her arms in front of her chest and began to pout. Seriously? I shrugged. Why deny the truth? I set the cig on the center console between us. She looked down at it and said, you killed those people in cold blood. They were coming after me, and I can't have that. They were drunk or something. I chuckled mirthlessly. Drunk? Have you seen these things up close? Have you seen the news? I saw them up close. I pay attention to the news. Then you know they ain't drunk. They're diseased, and whatever ails them is beyond a cure. How do you know there's no cure? Because they have no clue what the disease actually is. She shuddered. I haven't seen anyone die before. You see much more death before it's done. What the hell is wrong with you? I'm a psychopath. The sooner you're out of my space, the better. No, I don't believe that. She paused and thought for a moment and sighed. Sorry, I'm freaking out over here. Thank you for not tossing me out. Anyway, my name is Netana Dantikat, she said. She was a beautiful woman with a smooth, deep brown skin that seemed to be well cared for and full, trembling lips. Her big, bold eyes shone with an intelligence ready to obtain wisdom. She looked at me inquisitively. Your name? She asked in a soft tone. Wakan, I said, focusing on the road. It was my turn to enter the expressway. I know you're black, Netana said, and then waved her right index finger around the circles. But you got some Native American in there somewhere too, don't you? I didn't reply. The question confused me. Why is my complex ethnic background important? The moderate traffic at this point in the day did not surprise me. Even when evacuations are officially ordered, people would rather remain in their homes until the very last moment, unless a disaster such as Stage 5 hurricane threatened to wipe Miami down to sandbars. An outbreak that could potentially turn the city's population into mindless cannibals isn't as imminent since it's theoretically defendable with weapons or even locked doors. Given the current and potential scale of this epidemic, what place would be safe to run to? Refugee camps and military bases would be guarded by soldiers. But once inside, you'd be stuck within its confines until they deemed it prudent enough to venture out. Further, if only one person inside became infected, then everyone inside might succumb to the disease. I prefer a defensible structure, one that allows freedom of movement, and I own such a property. Why? Netana asked, interrupting my thoughts. Why what? Why would you drop me off at the next town? Why wouldn't I? Because I don't know anyone in the next town. Okay, so do you know anyone anywhere? Netana sighed in frustration. Haiti. You've been in the U.S. for a while, though, right? At least 10 years? How do you know that? Your accent. That's it? You could detect how long I've been in this country from my accent? There's just enough there to know you're Caribbean, but you've been here long enough to take some of the edge off. Could be I was born here. I snickered. And what? You took a banana boat to Haiti every morning for school? No, if you were born here, you wouldn't have that accent. You moved here with your parents when you were about 10 or 11, and y'all lived in Little Haiti. Your parents wanted you to attend school in a good district where you excelled, went to a university. That scenario explains your mild accent and articulate speech. Netana stared at me as though with those probing eyes for a long moment, then said, "You're very observant." I said nothing. When Netana realized I wasn't going to respond, she said, "So about me not being cast aside like a piece of trash in the next town?" She had a fretful look on her face, and I imagine it would be hard for most people to flout. Do you know anyone in Little Haiti you could travel with? No, she said, her voice trembling. I don't know. Look, I need to get out of Florida altogether. So that means you have to leave with me? No, I don't have to, but there's not much in the way of options, is there? Maybe we can find a group you can go with. Where are you going? I sighed. How did I end up in this situation? Well, I was forced into it. Far and away, I replied. Please. Far and away, I replied. Please? California. Oh, well, maybe I can go with you. I don't have family out there or anything, but it doesn't seem as bad as here. Do you ever find that there's a point in your life where you don't talk? Naitana rolled her eyes, but fell silent for the time being. All right, man. That's a longer chapter than I realized. Yeah. So that's basically what I got for now. Well, the whole book's done. All right. So if y'all want to check that out, y'all want to see what goes down, let me know. Let me know what you think in the comment section. Like I said, I'll put a link in the description box, and y'all can go on ahead and support your boy if you feel like it. All right. So, yeah, hit that like button, share the video, subscribe, whatever you want to do. But give me your honest thoughts in the comment section, please. I would love to hear it. All right, or see it. Thank you. Much love to y'all. Peace.